Alright, what's good everybody? Well, today's video we're going to address 5 transmission codes that pop up on the Trailblazers and Envoys. They all pop up at the same time. We've got P0740, P0753, P0758, P0785, and last but not least, P1860. So let's do this. So, I'm going to access the rear fuse panel in this truck. You guys might not have any of this extra crap. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to pull this cover off. And then for this little cover, get these little tabs here. Pull him up out of the way. Have our multimeter. We're going to set him to DC volts. So a problem that a lot of people have when they're doing stuff back here is finding a good ground for their meter. It really helps to have an alligator lead on the end of your negative probe of your meter. So you can use this seat bolt right here. That works. You're also going to find little hold down bolts for the fuse block. I've used them in the past. That's those guys right there. So how do you verify that you have a good ground for your meter? Well, you can just take your positive probe and you can touch this stud right here. You can either touch the stud, the nut, the part of the wire that connects to the nut, anywhere. What you're looking for is battery voltage. So you can see on my meter here, we're sitting at like 12.5 volts, something like that. So I know that my meter's grounded properly. And it's really important because this test is really important. This is our fuse we're testing right here. This is fuse number 47. Like all the other fuses, you can see it's got like 2 little silver tops to it. And they're actually test points for your meter. So you can take your probe and you can touch each point of the meter. And you can see here, we don't really have voltage, and on this side, we don't really have voltage. And the reason is this test has to be done with the key and accessory or run. So I'm going to turn the key on and get to it. So we've got the key on run now. Damn it, Sife. Okay, so the key's in the run position now. Again, take my probe of my meter. I'm going to touch this side of fuse 47. And you can see we've got pretty close to battery voltage. Now it's not really 12.5 right now because we've got a lot of accessories on with the key and run. But we have battery voltage. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I've also got 12.2. It's critical that you know what the voltage is on both sides of the fuse, because with these 5 codes that all pop up at the same time, this test determines what you're going to do next. And either way you go, it's not easy. If you do have power on one side of the fuse and you don't have power on the other side of the fuse, well then you can pull the fuse out and inspect it. You can set your meter to continuity and see if it's blown, and then replace the fuse. And that may very well fix the truck. But if you don't have power on either side of this fuse, that's going to take you in one direction. If you have power on both sides of this fuse, it's going to take you into a completely opposite direction. That's why this test is so important. So fucking important. You guys have no idea. So now that we know how to ground the meter, how we can verify the meter's grounded, and how we can test fuse 47 with the key in the accessory or run position, let's talk about a little bit more about these 5 codes and what they have in common. So you don't really have to be a car guy or an electronics guy or a transmission guy. You don't really have to be able to read this, but just for your information, I'm going to put it all out there. So you've got all these transmission codes for torque converter clutch solenoid 2-3 shift, 1-2 shift, 3-2 shift, and torque converter clutch pulse width modulated solenoid. And the diagram for all of these is exactly the same. What you have is you have power that goes through that fuse 47 that we tested, does a whole bunch of shit, but you'll notice here that it powers all of those solenoids. So what it does is it puts positive battery voltage to each of those solenoids inside the transmission. It's one wire. That wire goes through this fuse, goes through a connector, some other shit, comes back, and then it goes into the big connector that plugs into the transmission itself. The reason why this test that we did was so important is because in the big picture of the way that it operates, it's very, 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 very fucking, well, retarded. So you guys are going to have to excuse my rough, primitive SUV drawing skills. Alright, so there's the truck, and we've got 10-inch rims on it. That looks pretty cool, right? And here's the back door. So here's the fuse box where we are, and we've also got the fuse box under there, and then we've got the transmission just under here, and then we've got the key. Alright, we're just going to say that's the key. So what happens is you've got power that basically comes from this fuse box, and it comes up and it goes into the key. And when you turn the key to accessory or run, then it sends power through a whole bunch of connectors and a wire harness, and it goes through that fuse 47. When it leaves fuse 47, then it comes all the way back up the truck. It goes back through this fuse block, but there's no fuse there. It just goes through this fuse block, and then it comes all the way back to the transmission itself. So what you're doing is, when you're testing this fuse number 47, the results of that test is isolating this side of the circuit from this side of the circuit. Because if you were just to go and blindly just start following all these wires, I mean, you're going to go front to back, you know, through the truck looking for something, and you might not know what you're looking for. This test, you know, it's 100% easy to follow, you know what I mean? And it gives you a direction to go in. Now, I can't possibly cover every scenario as to what can cause this fuse either to not have power or to blow every time you put the fuse in and turn the key to run. But if you go on to GMT Nation, where guys work with you with stuff like that, you know, we can help you. You know what I'm saying? But we need to know this from the start. That's the first thing we're going to ask you. But for argument's sake, we'll just go through this like this. If you did not have power here at all on either side of fuse 47, we would be working from that fuse block up. We're going to be going up to the ignition switch, and we'd be going up to the fuse that puts power to it. If you had power on both sides of fuse 47, then we would be going from the fuse box in the back to the transmission and finding what's going on in between those two components. So as you can see, there's a lot to getting all this stuff to work, but by doing one test, you can rule out, you know, one half to the other. And it's just, it's the way you go. It's the way I do it. It's the way a lot of other people can do it. Now, this recently popped up on GMT Nation, and that's actually what inspired me to do this video, because, you know, I was reading the thread, and I was like, fuck, man, I know I've dealt with this before. And I found a post I made like 5 years ago which explained the same freaking thing, and it was doing the same tests on the same fuse. This dude in this situation went out and got a meter and decided to troubleshoot it himself, and he fixed it. Now, it did turn out to be, in his case, a blown fuse. I'm not saying that that's always going to be what it is, but those 5 codes, they all have something in common, and that's what the focus was on this video. So some more information on these codes and the way it all, you know, goes together. Every one of these solenoids, they share a power source, and the PCM has independent control by grounding these. So when you turn the key on, it actually does a self-test, and it tests all these, you know. And with all these codes, the truck will still drive, but the complaints from regular people who aren't technicians, they'll say, you know, the truck has low power, it won't get out of its way, it feels like the converter's clogged up, because what it's actually doing is the truck is stuck in second gear, and it feels like it has no power. So if you have 5 transmission solenoid codes, statistically, no one has ever blown out every solenoid at the exact same time. So what can usually cause, just say, this fuse to blow? Well, based on reports from other people, it's when the ignition switch is replaced, which is why that other guy's video sucks, because he didn't pull the power fuses to the ignition switch before he replaced it. The ignition lock cylinder itself, mice have actually eaten some of the wires underneath the truck and have basically put this power wire to ground, which popped this fuse. And one guy was actually fishing wires back here to run power wires for his amp and actually broke that fucking wire. And another one was a couple times a remote start install gone bad has caused this. You know, when people kind of just, they see what they see on the internet, and they think that they could just go out there and do it, and they don't test and verify circuits before they install the remote start. That's number 5. So no matter what the scenario was, the root cause of this, every time it came back to testing fuse 47 in the rear fuse block with the key on. I know I probably sound like a fucking robot because I keep saying test rear fuse 47 in the rear block with the key on, but that's the proper way to do it. You know, this is the proper way, you know, like I said, to separate which half of the circuit, you know, the problem lies on. This is another reason why having your own means of reading your own check engine light codes will pay off. Because let's just say that the truck really can't get out of its own way and you can't get it to AutoZone. Well, if you spent the $15 on the freaking little OBD2 plugin I showed a few videos back, and you bought the Torque app, well, you would get all these codes. Hopefully you Google those codes all in a cluster, Trailblazer, P0740, P0753, and all that shit, and you find either this video or GMT Nation. If you find that other form, which we're going to call Envoy, because we can't say their real name because they're a bunch of scum suckers, you're going to get a bunch of guesses. These motherfuckers will probably have you put an ignition switch in, or replacing the transmission, or a bunch of other retarded shit. That's why GMT Nation is #1. So fuck y'all. So the point of this, you guys that are unfortunate enough to get all 5 of these codes, and only these 5 codes at the exact same time, hope you guys can use this as a reference for testing this fuse back here, and, you know, getting your meter hooked up properly, doing this test, and then you're welcome to come and join the forum. It's free, it's not for profit, and everybody there is just as much as an enthusiast as I am. You know what I mean? You know, I'm really impressed with the guys over on the forum lately. The average do-it-yourself guy. I mean, these guys are going out and getting meters. It doesn't have to be a fancy one like I got. A basic Harbor Freight meter will tell you the same thing that we're doing here. You know, but these guys are going out and doing that shit, and they're doing these tests, and they're fixing these cars themselves, which is fucking awesome. You know what I'm saying? Thanks for watching. I hope you guys learned something from this. You know what I'm saying? If you like what you see, you like Chevy trucks, you like Chevy SUVs, pickups, you're a do-it-yourself guy, don't have much experience, you're a girl, man, I don't give a fuck. Anyone, subscribe to my shit.